Welcome to RUSI and to our annual peacekeeping conference with the United Nations Association on the International Day of the Peacekeepers. For those who don't know me, I'm Ewan Lawson. I'm a senior research fellow here at RUSI with a previous background in the military and some engagement with UN peacekeeping, hence a continued fascination with the subject. A few quick notices. In the event of an alarm, we're not expecting any tests, so they'll be for real. If you follow someone who says they're from RUSI, because we will evacuate in different directions depending on where the problem might be. We are generally reasonably relaxed. Hopefully by now you'll have found where the facilities are. Feel free through the day to use those as required. It's quite a long push through the morning this morning, so please feel free. And we will arrange for some water to be made available in the leg stretch between the first session and the keynote speech. However, we're going to start this morning with some important opening remarks, and it's my pleasure and indeed privilege to welcome the Right Honourable Mark Lancaster, who, as well as being the Minister for the Armed Forces, is also an officer in the Army Reserves and takes a great interest in these sort of matters. The Minister's remarks will be followed by Sarah Fountain-Smith, the Deputy High Commissioner for Canada, and you can see both of their CVs on your handouts. Sarah has extensive engagement with the UN and UN affairs and also with international human rights, so you're both particularly well placed to kick us off today. And it's perhaps appropriate, as I introduce Sarah in a moment, to also thank at this stage the Canadian High Commission and the Embassy of the Netherlands for their support to today. Your food and water and drink is provided, amongst other things, by Canada and the Netherlands, and without which support, an event such as this would not be possible. But on that note, I will shut up and ask the Minister to speak. Thank you.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be able to be here this morning, and I'm delighted to be able to open the International Day of UN Peacekeepers. Let me start, of course, by reiterating those thanks to our host, the United Nations Association, RUSI, the Canadian High Commission, and of course the Dutch Embassy, who have put together a packed and excellent programme today. This year we celebrate the 70th anniversary of UN peacekeeping, honouring those women and men of over 120 nations who have served the cause of peace so valiantly over all those years. And today, in particular, we pay tribute at the cenotaph to more than 3,700 fallen UN peacekeepers who made the ultimate sacrifice in pursuit of peace. These include those who have lost their lives serving with the United Nations in Mali, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and the Central African Republic since the start of this year. As I speak, there are nearly 100,000 UN peacekeepers in action in 14 missions in the most challenging of environments, underlining that peacekeeping is as important today as it's ever been. And you will hear this morning what some of those missions are achieving on the ground despite all these challenges. Peacekeepers matter. They matter because it is peacekeepers who protect the innocent and create the conditions for aid agencies to operate. It is peacekeepers who create the space for warring parties to seek settlement and compromise by non-violent means. And it is peacekeepers who create the opportunity to bring countries back from the brink. In a world which has never been more connected, and where the problems of one country have the tendency to spill over into another, creating regional or even global instability, this has never been more important. Peacekeepers matter because effective peacekeeping is in the interest of all of our security and prosperity. That's why we will continue to use our position as a permanent member of the Security Council to further the cause of peacekeeping. And it's why we remain committed to the 3 Ps approach we launched at the UN Peacekeeping Defence Ministerial in London 2 years ago. Binding quality pledges of people and equipment effective planning of missions, and increased performance through leadership, accountability, and determination. It's worth looking at the progress we made against each. Let's start with quality pledges. I am proud to say that the UK has nearly 700 British troops wearing the blue beret right now in South Sudan, Cyprus, Somalia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mali, and indeed Libya. In 2015, we said we would send our people to support South Sudan, a country in the grip of a vast humanitarian crisis, and we kept our word. I had the opportunity to meet men and women from across the services in South Sudan a few weeks ago. Engineers, infantry, medics, and many others beside. Witnessing their commitment and humanity at first hand was inspiring, and I'm delighted that we'll hear from Lieutenant Colonel Katie Hislop, a former commanding officer of the British military mission, in the first panel session shortly. I am delighted that we were able to announce our extension of this deployment until 2020 at last year's UN Peacekeeping Ministerial in Vancouver. I also visited our troops in Somalia, who are providing invaluable logistic assistance to the African Union mission there, AMISOM, an example of how the UN and regional organisations can work together effectively. In an ever-changing threat environment, peacekeeping missions are becoming ever more complex. That means the UN will continually have to up its game. That is why we have used some of our voluntary contributions to help fund the UN Strategic Force Generation and Capability Cell, to identify capability requirements and coordinate member states' contributions. That is why we have also trained 11,000 troops from over 30 countries to help them prepare for deployments including the DRC and South Sudan. And that is why General Messenger, our Vice Chief of Defence, helped launch a Women, Peace and Security Chief of Defence network with Canada and Bangladesh at last year's Peacekeeping Ministerial in Vancouver, to deepen the inclusion of WPS issues throughout the planning stages. Having covered pledges and planning, let me turn to performance. We must improve performance and strengthen accountability for underperformance. We continue to work with the UN and other troop-contributing countries to improve leadership, to monitor performance, and where necessary, to take action. We fully support the UN Secretary-General's approach to end sexual exploitation and abuse by those in positions of power against those they are meant to assist. All allegations should be investigated quickly, thoroughly, fairly, and transparently. Conflicts are not only played out on the battlefield, but also as sexual violence against women, men, girls, and boys. We refuse to see this as collateral damage. We refuse to accept that there's anything inevitable about suspending the rules of civilization in times of war. And we're following our plan to end sexual violence in conflict zones. That's why we've deployed military gender and protection advisors to the Democratic Republic of Congo, who have in turn trained and deployed with UN female engagement teams in North Kivu in the Congo, ensuring UN peacekeepers do their utmost to protect civilians from human rights violations. All the while, we're using our role as this year's chair of the Women, Peace and Security Chiefs of Defence Network to press for the highest standards of behaviour in all UN troop deployments. But we plan to go further still by engaging more women in UN missions. We must continue to recognise the essential role of women for the operational effectiveness of these missions and engage more women in all components of peacekeeping missions to achieve sustainable peace. So we're making progress against those pivotal 3 Ps, but more needs to be done to ensure effective and efficient peacekeeping. We were honoured to host the UN CEO board meeting at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office earlier this month with the UN Secretary-General, and I was delighted to discuss all these issues with Jean-Pierre Lacroix, the UN Under-Secretary-General for Peacekeeping Operations. I will see Monsieur Lacroix again in New York in the summer, and he knows I will be pressing hard for continued progress. So UN peacekeepers serve on all of our behalf. As we mark 70 years of UN peacekeepers, we should recognise that through their efforts, hope has been given to millions of people to have productive, peaceful lives through improved security and stability. This is a proud legacy of 70 years of UN peacekeeping, and I am very pleased to pay tribute to all the UN peacekeepers now and in the past. Thank you.
Minister Lancaster, Dr. von Hippel, Excellencies, distinguished guests, Ewan, thank you very much. Bonjour à tout le monde. Today we're celebrating peacekeepers and the vital work that they do in preventing conflict and protecting civilians. And at the outset, I'd like to recognize the UN Association of the UK, RUSI, and the Embassy of the Netherlands, who are our partners in today's event, which aims to bring together people to discuss the challenges of modern peacekeeping. Making peacekeeping missions more efficient and secure in a constantly changing world is a priority for Canada. We have renewed our efforts to contribute to peace operations, both materially and as a nation working with others to improve the effectiveness of peace operations in the face of new global challenges. In 1957, Canada's then Foreign Minister, Lester Pearson, won the Nobel Peace Prize for his role in creating the first armed UN peacekeeping force. However, as this audience knows well, today's missions are not simply the strategic buffer force between hostile states that Lester Pearson conceived of all of those years ago. More complex situations and missions have been the norm now for decades, going back to the 1960 mission in the Congo, through to missions in the former Yugoslavia, Somalia, and Rwanda, right up to our current multidimensional operations. Peacekeepers today often face protracted conflict situations in which the parties may not have an interest in the reconciliation or the peace-building processes which peace operations are meant to support. Non-state armed groups, criminality, and cross-border actors are common challenges for peace operations, as are protection of civilian mandates. The range of personnel contributing member states has broadened substantially. This represents a welcome contribution to burden sharing, but it can also pose challenges given different capacities and sometimes different understandings of how to implement mandates. These were some of the issues discussed at the UN Peacekeeping Defence Ministerial in London in 2016. At that time, Canada confirmed that we would commit up to 600 troops and 150 police officers to UN-mandated peace operations, our largest contribution in over 20 years. In November 2017, Canada took on the hosting of the UN Peacekeeping Defence Ministerial in Vancouver. The focus of this meeting was on SMART pledges, or key enablers and partnerships with other countries. Innovation, training, and capacity building in pre-deployment, protecting those at risk, and early warning and rapid deployment. In all of these themes, gender was purposefully integrated as a cross-cutting issue. This focus recognized that increasing the proportion of women deployed overseas and empowering women in all aspects of peace and security are key to improving the effectiveness of UN missions. We know that women's participation in visible and leadership roles in missions can result in improved community engagement, intelligence gathering, situational awareness, and early warning capacity, as women may have better access to some segments of the population in the host communities. At this moment, I'd like to acknowledge the presence also of Lieutenant Colonel Katie Hislop, who recently commanded the UK's contingent in South Sudan, demonstrating exemplary leadership. Canada believes that diversity is a strength, including in peace operations. More diverse and inclusive teams produce better outcomes, not only in terms of operational effectiveness, but also by demonstrating that women have the ability and the right to participate fully, not only in peace operations and security institutions, but in society more broadly. Unfortunately, despite a 2015 UN Security Council resolution to double the participation of women military and police peacekeepers, to date, the percentage of women deployed in uniform has only increased by 0.2%. At this rate, our goal will not be reached until 2054. It's with this in mind that Canada launched the ELSI initiative for women in peace operations at the 2017 Vancouver Peacekeeping Ministerial Conference. Named after Elsie McGill, a Canadian human rights pioneer, aeronautical engineer, and the first woman to design aircraft, the aim of the LC initiative is to increase the meaningful participation of women in UN peace operations. The LC initiative will provide tailored training and technical assistance packages for troop and police contributing countries, which could include military and police expert advice, training, mentoring, recruitment support, or provision of non-lethal equipment. In parallel, it will also provide assistance to designated UN missions to improve their ability to support and benefit from women's increased participation in peace operations. This could include improving gender inclusivity in leadership, policies, and in physical installations in order to provide productive and safe working environments for women peacekeepers. Lastly, the initiative will include a global financial mechanism to provide assistance to troop and police contributing countries for the deployment of women peacekeepers, to which Canada has committed $15 million as seed funding. We warmly welcome the enthusiastic participation of countries which have joined the contact group for this initiative, including the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Sweden, who are represented here today. We look forward to working together to accelerate progress towards increased women's participation in peace operations. Another key challenge in modern peace operations, and one of the most abhorrent situations that our brave men and women must face, is that of children in situations of armed conflict. Despite an extensive framework in international law to protect children from military recruitment and exploitation, there's been a gap in policies and doctrine aimed at preventing the recruitment of children and responding to child soldiers encountered in the course of peacekeeping. It's for this reason that Canada, with the assistance of the Romeo Dallaire Child Soldiers Initiative, developed the Vancouver Principles on Peacekeeping and the Prevention of the Recruitment and Use of Child Soldiers, which were also launched on the margins of the 2017 ministerial. To date, 64 countries have endorsed the Vancouver Principles, which cover training and planning with respect to situations involving children in armed conflict, as well as the conduct and care of their own forces. The principles take an assertive stance on preventing child recruitment in the context of peace operations, specifically with respect to early warning signs and the active prevention of recruitment. The principles also commit signatories to report abuses and grave violations against children in situations of armed conflict. They call for the inclusion of child protection expertise in peace operations, and they highlight the need for proper psychological support for peacekeepers who have faced child soldiers. In addition to working to these efforts to work with others to address key challenges in modern peacekeeping, Canada has recently made 2 SMART pledges of material support. The first, made last November, is for the provision of Hercules transport aircraft to provide tactical airlift support for the UN's Regional Service Center in Entebbe, Uganda. In March of this year, we announced our second SMART pledge, an air task force to be deployed to the UN stabilization mission in Mali for 12 months. The Air Task Force will include at least 2 Chinook helicopters to provide urgently needed medical evacuation, transport, and logistics capacity, as well as at least 4 Griffin helicopters to provide armed escort and protection. The deployment will include a number of Canadian Armed Forces personnel who will provide the medical evacuation and logistical support capabilities. Captain David Mazer from Canada's Department of National Defence is with us today. He'll be speaking on a panel this afternoon, and he's been closely involved in the planning of this deployment. Canada's SMART pledges seek to support the UN while driving the need for innovation and coordination. Finally, as a part of our G7 presidency this year, Canada has been promoting discussions on global peace and security, including support for UN efforts and reform to ensure that peace operations are as effective and as efficient as possible. In April, G7 foreign ministers met in Toronto, and they underlined the critical role of peacekeeping operations in the protection of civilians, in particular from sexual violence and the prevention of mass atrocities. These recommendations will be taken forward to G7 leaders when they meet in Charlevoix in June. And we will also continue to focus on peacekeeping in the context of our candidacy for a seat on the UN Security Council for the term 2021-2022. Today, as we celebrate peacekeepers around the world for their vital contributions, and as we honor those who've made sacrifices in the service of others, it's timely to renew our commitment and to redouble our efforts to improve the effectiveness of peace operations for a more peaceful and secure world. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you both. I think it's been really vital to hear first this morning about how both Canada and the UK remain committed to peacekeeping. I think both the Minister and the Deputy High Commissioner recognise the importance of peacekeeping, but also it was good to hear a reflection of the challenges which will underpin a lot of what we talk about later today. And I think they certainly provided a very firm foundation for our discussions as we move forward. So I'd like to take this opportunity to ask you to join me in thanking both the Minister and the Deputy High Commissioner for their time and their insights this morning. Thank you very much.